moment, we'll find out what's behind this steady creep in cases. And it's been 40 years since Argentinian forces invaded the British overseas territory of the Falkland Islands. We find out what it is like from the people who were there. But first, here's the latest news.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian troops in the north of the country are noticeably withdrawing. Overnight, he says the situation in the east of the country remains extremely difficult and they're preparing for further attacks from Moscow in the south. It comes as Russia agrees to allow 7 humanitarian corridors to open for evacuations today. The Red Cross is seeking to lead a rescue convoy from the besieged city of Mariupol. President Zelensky is calling on the West to continue to impose sanctions on the Kremlin.
In the north of the country, the occupiers continued to retreat, slowly but noticeably. In the east, the situation remains extremely difficult. Russian troops are moving to Donbass and towards Kharkiv. They're preparing new strikes. We're preparing an ever more active defence.
President Zelensky there. Now, thousands of people here are expected to protest across Britain today over the cost of living crisis and the rising price of energy bills. Yesterday, millions around the UK saw their energy bill increase by an average of £700 a year as the price cap rose. An austerity campaign group says the demonstrations will highlight the real hardships people are facing, with many having to choose whether to eat or heat. Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Brandon Lewis, has told GB News the government can't completely nullify the impacts of global pressures on energy prices.
This is why the Chancellor put in place such a big package. It's now about £22 billion worth of support, with the biggest tax reduction overall in about 25 years, to put more money in people's pockets to deal with some of these challenges. But it is a global challenge that was building before the Ukraine invasion by Putin, and it's something that invasion is putting further pressure on, obviously.
Parents and carers can now book COVID jabs for children aged between 5 to 11 years old in England. They'll be able to make an appointment for a vaccine or go to a walk-in clinic from Monday. Children will be offered 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech jab, at least 12 weeks apart. Boris Johnson has welcomed a 2-month truce agreed by the warring sides in Yemen, saying it could provide an end to the suffering. The deal, negotiated by the United Nations between the Saudi-led coalition and Iran-backed Houthi rebels, is due to come into effect later this afternoon. The organisation estimates nearly 400,000 people have been killed during the 7-year conflict, and millions have been pushed into hunger. Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking conviction has been upheld by a US judge who also denied her request for a retrial. Her lawyers had appealed after it emerged one of the jurors had failed to disclose he was a victim of sexual abuse. The judge found the juror harboured no bias towards Maxwell and that he was fair and impartial. Maxwell was convicted in December of helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls. The Oscars Academy says it's accepted Will Smith's resignation from the organisation and will continue to move forward with disciplinary hearings. The 53-year-old actor has stepped down after slapping comedian Chris Rock on stage during last Sunday's ceremony. He says his actions were shocking, painful and inexcusable, and he'll accept any consequences that emerge. And today marks 40 years since Argentina invaded the Falklands Islands. 255 British soldiers died, along with 650 Argentinians in the conflict, after Margaret Thatcher ordered the territory be recaptured. Pipers are being asked to play in a national commemoration on June the 18th to remember those who were killed and wounded in the 74-day conflict. Former head of the British Army, General Lord Dannatt, has told GB News he remembers where he was when he heard about the invasion.
In 1982, I was a student at the Army Staff College at Camberley, and someone came into our syndicate discussion room and said the Argentinians have invaded the Falklands. And we all said to each other, where are the Falklands? So we sent someone off to the library to get an atlas, because I'm afraid there was a view. They were off Scotland. But of course, as we all realised, it was 8,000 miles down there in the South Atlantic. And that kicked off that day, that extraordinary adventure, which sadly led to the loss of 255 British servicemen.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Hello, it's Saturday, which means it's time for the Saturday selection. Coming up on today's show, should you be worried about the COVID cases rising? We speak to Professor Carl Hennigan to find out. And it's been 40 years since Argentinian forces invaded the Falkland Islands. We speak to former Security Minister and Falklands veteran Lord West. But joining us today, Phil?
With the stories from the week's papers is futurist and broadcaster Andrew Eborn. Andrew, what's been catching your eye?
Well, first of all, it's delightful to see you both back again. The perfect start to any Saturday. Last time I saw you, I was actually Sir Tim Rice. I was watching your programme, and all of a sudden, if he ruled the world, he said, if I ruled the world, men over 35 wouldn't wear shorts. And I was sat in my shorts.
Oh, my word.
I thought, well, as soon as I reach 35, I'll worry. So, well, it has been extraordinary. It's been the worst of weeks, it's been the best of weeks, from the goodwill slapping to Joe Biden's slip, all of those sort of things. It's been pretty horrendous, but I always thought we should start the papers with a glorious pun, because the pun is mightier than the sword. And I know you're going to talk about the draw later, but I love this one from our good friends at The Sun. It's Iranian men. Hallelujah. Come on. It's like good. But not only that, it's a double pun to get us going on a Saturday, because it's coming omen. Because he's there saying, we play on day one for the first time since '66. I was hoping that they wouldn't take at least a couple of paragraphs to mention '66, but they always do. The other thing that's really interesting is the song It's Coming Home is now trending on Twitter. Yes. It's all coming home, and so we can see all that sort of stuff as well. But the thing that's dominating the news, and it's rather sad, this actually, and I'll tell you why, it's all about Will Smith. And we just heard about his resignation. And we've just heard, and people make jokes about goodwill slapping and men in black and blue and so on and so forth, but there are some serious issues there. And only in the glorious history of the Academy have there ever been 5 people in total thrown out, including Weinstein and Polanski and so on and so forth. So I think, in answer to your question, he did the right thing to resign. My concern about it is this. First of all, the joke wasn't very good from Chris Rock, and I know you've got a specialist coming on to talk about how devastating it is, particularly for women, to lose their hair. It does raise all sorts of questions about the boundaries of comedy. And you know, if you listen to any of Ricky Gervais's things at the Golden Globe, everybody's up for it. You do that sort of stuff. People were saying, was it staged? And there's no way it was staged, simply because it's a career potentially destroying moment for Will Smith. But my biggest objection of all is that it's bounced everything, all the good news, off the papers. So, for example, it's the first time ever that Samuel Jackson won an Oscar. First time ever. Nobody's talking about that. The wonderful moment, and I was in tears about this bit. The bit I was in tears about was how Lady Gaga, with such dignity, helped Liza Minnelli, who was in a wheelchair, struggling over the words and so on and so forth. And she was there. It was reminiscent of what she did with Tony Bennett and so on and so forth. And it was. Do watch that clip if you haven't seen it. Lady Gaga was brilliant. Liza Minnelli was struggling, is the short answer. And Lady Gaga was just so elegant. And a word which is sort of caught off, basically off microphone, was sort of, don't worry, I've got you. And you could hear that in some of the audio, things like that, and that sort of stuff. The other thing that's also thrown off the papers is that scientists have published, for the first time, a complete sequence of the human genome. And what that means that we can, it's basically the building blocks of DNA, which is brilliant. And nobody's really talking about it. It is one of the most seismic moments in medical history, because they've been trying to do this for at least 20 years. What this means is that we can identify diseases, like things like cancer. We look at illnesses and so on and so forth, and how we might be able to fix those in the future. So what I would say, yes, it's tragic what's happening about Will. The Academy will make a decision, whatever happens. I think Will needs to redefine himself, but he's owning the narrative. But my point is, let's look at the good stories, because there are plenty around.
Have you got any good stories for us,
Well,
Esther?
I don't know if it's a good story, but I agreed with Carol Malone today in the Express, and this was about the Queen deciding to have Prince Andrew on her arm as she went into her husband's memorial service at Westminster Abbey, and cries of how could she? Prince Andrew, no longer part of public life, had all of his titles removed from him, and that's right. But, as I said, I agree with Carolyn Malone here because this is the Queen's son. Philip was his father. She needed all her children around her. And I thought it was a positive move that she thought, yes, I've always put country and everything before maybe family life. I've always done that. Yes, he's lost all of his public standing and his public status. But in this matter, as I'm walked into and escorted into this memorial service, having served the country for 70 years, then she would have all her children around her and Andrew too. Because what was he meant to do? Was Andrew meant to creep in at the back, leave via the back entrance to not be seen? No, this was a family issue in a way, and all of the children were going to be there. And she did have a weep there. She did have a little cry. And I think, this could be one of her final public outings as well. Big year for her this year. And I think she wanted a family around her. And I think in that regard, yes. But is he away from public life? I agree with that too. He's done too many things wrong to be a part of public life, but in this private manner, yes, he should.
Well, at least, Prince Philip was Andrew's dad after all.
Absolutely.
That's can't be excluded from your dad's memorial service, can you?
But also, you raised an interesting point. You say he didn't creep in. Actually, the Queen had to come in through the back entrance because she's not in the greatest of health. So,
yes.
And as I understand the reports, he sort of pushed the priest who was going to be walking the Queen to her seat aside, effectively, and wanted to walk with her. It does beg the question, though, and it's on all the papers today, is should Andrew take a big part in the Jubilee celebrations? And we hear reports that Charles and William say no, he shouldn't. What are your views?
No, I don't think I don't think Andrew should play a large part in any of those celebrations. Personally, what do you think? I don't think so.
No.
Not the public celebrations.
No, and that's what I said. Not in public, but the private one, yes, but not in public. And I don't think the country would want that either. But here's another news story for some of us who live on coffee. This could be bad news here, and it's basically how coffee takes its toll on all of us. What is it? Is it ruining your face? Experts reveal how bad it can be for your face, dehydrates it, get ticks in the eyes, dizziness, muscle tremors, insomnia and high blood pressure, but it all takes its toll on your face. I'm somebody who has multiple espressos before I do anything in the morning, so I might be cutting down now, having realised what it does to the old face there.
Well, something's ruined my face. I'm not entirely sure. Andrew, I'm not sure it's. I don't actually drink that much coffee, so I can't even use that as an excuse to it. But I wish I could have. I've got no excuse for my face being ruined.
The great thing about coffee and various other things is you can find any report to support any view. Just before Christmas, there was a report saying how good coffee was for you, and it would prevent things like dementia and so on and so forth. So I'll send you a different link so you can pick whichever view you like. It's like most things on the internet. There's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, but question everything.
And choose your own truth. Andrew, I'm loving that. That's exactly what I'll be doing. Thank you so much for going through the papers. Now, food outlets with over 250 employees will need to display calorie information on their menus.
It's all part of the calorie labelling regulations brought in to help customers make more informed and healthier choices.
Joining us now is Emma McClarkin, who is the CEO of the British Beer and Pub Association. So, Emma, why, oh why, are we doing this?
Well, it is now required from the 6th of April that those pubs, and we're talking about half the pubs in the UK now, display calorie labelling on their menus. And whilst we're committed to helping the government and our customers become healthier, it is something that is adding extra burden to businesses and extreme cost at a time where we're recovering from the pandemic. We're already seeing energy costs soaring. And so this is really some untimely added burden from the government.
Emma, it certainly put me off when I went into a pub and saw these calories listed on the menu. And what slightly put me off is that it said on the menu that you're supposed to have around 2,000 calories a day. And the thing I was about to pick was, I think, 2,350 calories. So I quickly made a different choice, knowing the wrath I'd get from Esther if I was to order in one meal something that was more than my daily calorific intake. So I just wondered, that clearly led to a change in my customer behaviour. So for those places that have already introduced it, have they seen any impact on their customers' behaviour as a result of this?
It has had received mixed reviews, I have to say, and largely negative ones, because people just want to come in and have a treat and not feel guilty about it. I think there is, unfortunately, now when they see the calories, they maybe make healthier decisions, which is, of course, a positive, but at the same time, they wanted to come out and enjoy themselves, celebrate perhaps. And, a treat once in a while in moderation is no bad thing. But of course, now it's just that extra burden and the seasonality of our menus. We love to have changes in the menu, but that's going to be very difficult for businesses to do. If they've done a massive print run of their menus, it's going to cost them tens of thousands to reprint. So it is unfortunately something that we're going to have to learn to encompass into our business models, but it's not being as warmly welcomed by our customers.
It seems to me all designed to make life more miserable. But what I wanted to know, because I'm quite intrigued by this, is how do you work out how many calories there are in a meal that's about to be served, and then who checks that information is right? I mean, I sort of, in my cynical moments, think, I could open up somewhere and claim I've got the healthiest fish and chips in the world and say it's only got, 400 calories in it. And who's going to know any better? Who checks up to make sure that the information on these menus is accurate?
Well, I do wonder, Philip. I mean, I think the calorie police will be out there, but I imagine that there is unfortunately quite a lot of estimation going on, and it'll probably be a higher estimation just to make sure that they're completely covered. But it will restrict menus because they'll need to have those calorie calculations in the bag. So again, if you wanted to have a special on the menu, that's not going to be possible to do because it'll be harder to calculate those calories. So it is an unfortunate thing to come in at this moment in time in this period of recovery. We really hope that the government will understand that going forwards, whilst we want to inform our customers, of course we do need to understand the burden it's going to put on our businesses going forward. And we hope that we see a moratorium on any more legislation coming in that's going to add further burden at this moment in time.
Well, in the Mail here, Dr. Michael Mosley, and he's talking about the calories on menus, and the title is "No, It Won't Slim Us Down," and he's looking at a study in New York from 2016 that looked at the impact of this labelling, so introduced quite a while ago, 10 years earlier, and he said it did a little insignificant drop at first, and then it just disappeared and had no effect whatsoever, having those calorie labels next to the food. So that's one thing. So tiny change, I think it was less than 60 calories per item, the whole meal, and then nothing. And then the other article in the Times today, calorie count fails top chef's taste test. Because they're saying calories aren't the most important thing. It's actually about your nutrition and what else is going on there. They're saying it's a blunt instrument, and some of them say they're going to defy the law. So, if you had a message then going back to those ministers, those MPs trying to put these calories on menus, I mean, what would your message be back to them, Emma?
We had asked the government for a delay to the introduction of this legislation. We really hadn't had enough time or resource to prepare ourselves for it. So ideally, we'd have liked to have seen this delayed, but the entry point is next week. And many businesses will be scrambling to make sure that they are going to comply with this. We just need to be mindful and get some balance in here of the impact that it's going to have on the businesses that are running day to day versus the outcome or the benefit of introducing that legislation. And if, as you say, it's quite negligible, but the cost of business is huge, then we really need them to take a common sense approach to this. But I just encourage everybody out there, still go out and enjoy yourselves and celebrate life in moderation. And having that rare treat is something that we love, and particularly down at the local pub. So don't be afraid to go out still and enjoy yourselves.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. I'll tell you one thing, I know it was the talk of the pub when we were there. Nobody was talking about anything else. It was, look at these calories, do we want it, is it necessary, are we going to take any attention? It was the talk of the pub when we were there. And one other thing people are saying, do you know what, we're having such difficulty getting staff at the moment. You talk about all of the increasing costs, energy, VAT, all of these things, but they're saying we can't find staff. Who's the person now who's going to be doing all the calorie counting? Who's going to be doing this? So lots of implications in your local pub. Thank you for joining us this morning.
It'll certainly take more than a calorie count for me to lose weight, I think, to be perfectly honest. I think you have to be a bit more radical than that, to be honest. Stop eating might help. But
you're going to get on that cycling machine, aren't you, over Easter?
Well, so you keep telling me. Anyway, we'd love to hear your views about whether or not the calorie count on menus is going to change the way that you shop and where you go for your food, whether you're going to go to somewhere that doesn't have a calorie count on it because they're a smaller outlet, or what do you think about it?
You're just going to ignore it.
Like me. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'd love to hear what you think.
But coming up, we'll speak to Showbiz reporter Stephanie about the fallout from the Will Smith slap at the Oscars.
And with COVID cases on the rise, we'll speak to Professor Carl Hennigan, asking him, should we be concerned? All this and much more after the break.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back. US actor Will Smith has resigned from the Oscars Academy after slapping comedian Chris Rock on stage during last week's event.
In a statement, the actor said he had betrayed the trust of the Academy and that his actions were inexcusable.
The Academy accepted Smith's immediate resignation from the organisation, but will continue to move forward with its disciplinary proceedings against him.
Let's get more reaction from Showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci, and she joins us in the studio. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning, Esther.
So what did you make of all this?
Oh, my gosh. It was in the middle of the night, and I was watching it, and I was gobsmacked. I was just like, is this real? Is this staged? What is going on? This is supposed to be Will Smith's biggest night of his career. Before the slap, I would have said it was well-deserved for him to win this. He's put so much effort into his career over the 3 decades. So many films we love, Men in Black, Independence Day, and this was his moment to shine. And I was literally like, you could not make this stuff up on one of Hollywood's biggest night. What did you guys think? Did you think it was staged?
Well, to be fair, when I saw it, like you, I thought, no, I can't understand this. He knows the show is watched by billions of people.
Yeah.
It's not a private. sort of matter. It's being watched there, and I'm thinking, is it pre-organised?
Yeah.
Has he practiced it? And then people showed you it in slow-mo. It wasn't a punch, it was a slap.
Exactly.
So then I thought, well, maybe it was. But then, when he came back with all the expletives, etc., I thought, no, this really isn't.
That's
this is
beyond.
unfolding very, very badly here.
Yeah.
Couldn't quite understand how he lost it so much.
But it was an interesting point, though, about it being a slap and not a punch, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think that, because, you know, if you felt so, you know...
he would have gone...
You thought you might go and punch him, but maybe the slap, I thought that might have been staged, the fact that it was just sort of...
I also thought maybe he didn't know what he was doing. You know, when you put yourself up there, you're starting, and then he thought, what am I doing? And then he feels he's got to do something. It was just car crash.
That's why a lot of people are thinking it was premeditated, and as he was walking up, he could have just walked back, you know. He had that moment when he was walking up towards Chris Rock where he was actually thinking in his head, what am I going to do on stage? And I think Chris Rock was taken back, and you could see that on his face, because he was like, I've just been slapped by Will Smith. And it's like, even then, he was still bringing comedy to what happened. But, you know, in the days that's followed, he says he's still processing it himself, and he will talk about it, he said. He said it will be serious, but he said he's going to do a fun little skit about it as well.
The interesting thing was in the Mirror today, on page 3, it talks about how the Los Angeles Police Department were going to charge him, but that Chris Rock has said he doesn't want to press charges.
Which I think is very nice of Chris Rock, but as well, if he did press charges, it would have been a long, drawn-out affair, and as we can tell already, the Academy already looking to discipline Will about his actions as well. So I think Chris Rock knows that Will Smith is going to get his fair due, and to be honest, his big night has been overshadowed by his actions. And Will Smith and Chris Rock, they've had this history, a frosty history, where this isn't the first time Chris Rock has attacked Jada or made fun of her. So I think it was all leading up to that moment.
I just wondered if, I mean, he's resigned, and I just therefore wonder what disciplinary action they can take after he's resigned from the organisation. I mean, could they take the Oscar away from him? Is that a possibility? It seems a bit unlikely, isn't it?
I doubt they will. So with the Academy, they've got an Academy Board of Governors, which is made up of 54 members, mostly actors, Whoopi Goldberg, Steven Spielberg. So these are among the people who are going to decide the outcome for Will. And earlier on this week, Whoopi Goldberg said, we are not going to be taking the Oscar from him. So she's kind of said that's off the table. But he will be disciplined. But he's been quite smart by saying he's going to resign, because now they can't say they're going to expel him and whatever, so they will bring their own results. So more likely they'll suspend him, but whatever they say, it doesn't make a difference, because he's been smart and resigned himself from the membership.
Now, I know there was other articles in the papers today, one in the Times, saying, oh, has this, in a way, updated the Oscars, which seemed very much out of date? Has this given them the new lease of life? And will next year see the return of Rock and Smith as maybe they host the awards together? So is this something that's, you know, reinvigorated the Oscars?
Sadly, yes, it has. It's taken it. I'm sorry, guys.
No, it beats virtue signalling speeches from the platform, though, doesn't it?
It has, because this is what people... You know, I know everyone's been shocked, but look, it's been a talking point around the world.
So how about the Grammys, then? That's on tomorrow night, which is always... theirs has usually been about clothes. That J-Lo dress, you know, with the, you know, down... well, naked down to the navel. I couldn't think of any other words. Lady Gaga arriving in an egg. So what's going to happen at the Grammys?
I always like to say the Grammys are like the Oscars' naughty sister, and they are, because musicians are more out of control than actresses and actors, and tomorrow is going to be a big one for the Grammys. They've moved from California to Las Vegas, which is obviously the biggest place for showbiz, but also the Grammys are trying to be more woke as well. They've done for their big 4 awards, like the Artist, Best Song, they've increased it to 10 nominees to make it more inclusive and more diverse. But someone like Kanye West, I would have been watching out for him. He's not allowed to come to the awards. They said that he was due to perform, but they said they won't allow him to perform due to his current online behaviour.
The Oscars have booked him for next year.
He will be there indeed. So Kanye West is not there, but actually a lot of artists have been snubbing the Grammy Awards, like Drake. Kanye posted a video of him urinating on the awards and stuff. But to be honest, I don't think tomorrow will be toned down. I think people will be talking about the slap on stage. So come on, this is Hollywood. They're going to go full full force for it.
Stephanie Tetchy, thank you so much indeed for joining us.
No worries.
Now, with COVID-19 infections rising across most of the UK.
In England and Wales, the virus is now circulating at levels last seen at the start of February.
Joining us now is Professor Carl Hennigan, who is a clinical epidemiologist and from Oxford University. Carl, thank you so much for joining us. How concerned should we be about this rise in COVID cases?
Well, you're welcome. What's happening now is what you see is the sort of circulation of coronaviruses as we come to the end of spring. Actually, they do rise again. And if you go back 2 years ago when we went into restrictions, it's a very similar pattern to what was happening then. What we shouldn't do is need to panic, because if you look at the data now, actually it's coming off, and actually it's slowed to a point where actually it's now going negative. So what you're going to see in the next few weeks is actually these cases come off dramatically. Now, it's going to be difficult to tell that because all of the testing has disappeared. But what you'll see is the survey that's done by the ONS will show that as we go now into spring and summer, these cases should follow a pattern where they drop off. So I don't think we need to be concerned. What I talk about now is just being risk aware, understanding your own risk as you go about the world. What's the risk to you? What can you do to minimize the damage of having a virus? What can you do to protect yourself? But still think about those that are the most vulnerable in society. There are still issues about how we go forward caring for them and making sure they receive the most appropriate care so that they don't succumb to the effects of a virus like this.
And has the increase in cases been replicated by an increase in the number of people in hospital with COVID?
Yeah, so what we've seen is, and I think we're learning this because we've never truly understood what's happened with viruses. So cases in hospital have gone to about 20,000. But importantly, a proportion of them, even up to half, have not gone in with COVID that's been detected because you're testing everybody on admission. And you'll pick up those that are infectious, but those that are past infected. The important number to look at is those that are in the intensive care unit that go into what we call the most severe, the ventilation beds. And they're still very low numbers. If you look at it in the UK, it's about 356. And think of the population, that's 67 million people. That's a very low number. For comparison, if you go back a year ago in the winter of 2021, there was about 4,000 people on the intensive care bed. So we're in a much better place than what we were previously. And that's where there's a big difference in terms of how we now deal with this virus going forward.
Now, Carl, you're the director of the University of Oxford's Centre of Evidence-Based Medicine. And what I want to know is what happened to you this week on Twitter? Because you were bringing that evidence-based knowledge to public awareness.
So, we're really interested. It's the clues in the title. We're interested in evidence. We did a report just to look at, can we understand this issue of who died with or from COVID? We went back to pre-existing evidence. We went back to huge numbers of freedom of information requests and put out a report that said it's very confusing. We may never get to the truth because there are so many definitions of death. And with that, nobody has done what we call is verify those deaths. And I can talk about how you go about that. That report went out. It got covered in the press. It was in the Mail, in the Express. And what happened on the Sunday morning is I didn't put an opinion on there. I just retweeted the Mail article. And it came with the picture and the headline. And the article included the word could. And immediately within about 2 hours, I got an email saying my Twitter account has violated Twitter rules and I'm now suspended. I have to say that really concerned me, because it wasn't my opinion we're talking about. It was an attack on the free press. And I think, that creates huge issues, because if you're not free to ask questions, which I've done for 25 years now, ask questions, try and find the evidence. Don't give your opinion, give the evidence. Now, these are really seriously important issues when we're talking about what's going to happen here is if we don't like your opinion, we don't like your question, we're going to censor you. And I think these are dangerous times in terms of that issues going forward that do need to be sorted.
And how did you stand up for yourself? How did you get back on Twitter, or how did you point out that this was facts, not opinion?
Well, I didn't do anything, to be honest, because I think about 12 hours, 24 hours later, what happened is Twitter came back and said, we've made a mistake. Now, that obviously occurs sometimes. I don't know why, but the papers picked up on this and ran articles. And I'm aware Nadine Dorries has picked this up and said the new government bill will deal with this issue, because he just can't go around turning around. And I assume it was some element of artificial intelligence, or somebody who didn't like the headline just said, I'm going to have this ban. And then 12, 24 hours later, it's a bit like, I don't know whether they've got it wrong, but I have no explanation. So I can't answer the question of what makes a difference between you being taken down and what makes a difference between them deciding to put you back up there.
Yeah, well, and the only reason I wanted to bring this to the fore, I mean, I was aware of you a long time ago, and this was to do with the Primados case, where parents of children who they'd taken this pregnancy test, a hormone pregnancy test, and the impacts it had on their children, and they were desperately looking for support, desperately trying to understand the medicine they'd taken, desperately trying to maybe take a case against a pharmaceutical company, and it was your evidence-based way of going about things through Oxford University and what you did there that gave these families so much support. And I think people need to, have that. We need to have these freedoms.
So you're talking about an incredibly important case there, Primados. And I remember when Marie Lyon first contacted me and I said, look, this is what we do. We look at the evidence. If the evidence supports you, we'll let you know, but if it doesn't, we'll do the same. We're not influenced by opinions, by commercialization. Primados is a very good example of using systematic review methods to collate all of the evidence and not do what has happened throughout this pandemic, is cherry pick the bit of the evidence that support your argument. And what we've seen throughout this pandemic is the first pandemic in the social media era, where people really have tried to influence what happened next with saying there's a simple solution, when actually there's been far more uncertainty about many interventions. And in posing the questions, it's been very difficult to get through to people about a virus, about an endemic virus that's out there, and think about how you manage it sensibly, as opposed to what you think should happen next. And I'd say to everybody, all your listeners, go and look at the Primados story. There's some great pieces out there that will explain, what goes wrong if you don't respond to the evidence and you respond to the push of a commercialized world where you try to push a treatment that led to significant, devastating consequences for women.
Carl, I just wanted to highlight an article by Camilla Tominey in The Telegraph today on page 25, which is called "Public Sector is Still Living in a Lockdown Fantasy." And she mentions in this article how, the passport office is still saying mask wearing is compulsory in their office. There was a dry cleaner in her village who told her that the council's still reluctant to open the high street to cars, but they stopped going down the high street during the pandemic. Bradford Council told me, I asked them, that my local council, I asked them how many staff were still working from home, and they said they didn't know, which was quite alarming, to be perfectly honest. I just wondered if you had a view about whether or not, given the number of cases there are, whether or not there's a good reason for these public sector bodies to carry on with these COVID restrictions, even though the government have in effect said that they should all be scrapped.
Yeah, so I think throughout this pandemic, what we've seen is about 50% of the people could work from home and 50% of people had to go to their jobs because it required them to do so. And in doing that, you've seen the first split in society. People who've carried on with their normal activities are still in a position now where they're going, well, not much has changed for me. But what we did with the fear messaging is create a significant portion of people very scared, who basically have spent 18 months to 2 years still at home and are now finding it very difficult to re-emerge into a normal world, particularly so if they still think, well, after 2 years, I haven't faced this virus and I have actually missed it. So I want to carry on in that vein. The problem is, as we emerge from this, is all of the societal and economic problems are amounting and are going to continue for the medium and long term. So this is where we've got to go from a risk-averse approach to this risk-aware approach. Just be aware of your risks as you go about your life, but actually you've got to emerge into society and help society get back to a normal functioning, if you like. Now, in doing that, I think it's the public sector has a duty and a role to help the economy and the society and get back to work. But I recognise for many people this is very difficult because for 2 years they've had this messaging at them that particularly they're all potentially going to kill grandma. And I understand why people are finding it difficult. The good news is I think over the last 4 to 8 weeks, and I think as we go into summer, I think we'll see people more and more emerge back into normality.
Professor Carl Hennigan, thank you very much indeed. And from us here, you keep going with your evidence-based research and keep giving us those facts. Thank you very much indeed. But I think he's right there, going from risk-averse to risk-aware. I mean, we see this hardly anybody in the offices when we go into work. People aren't in work, and really we do need to get back into the office, get back living our lives.
Absolutely. Now, coming up, it's been 40 years since the Argentinian forces invaded the British overseas territory of the Falkland Islands. We find out what it was like from a veteran who fought in the war.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Believe it or not, it's been 40 years since Argentinian forces invaded the British overseas territory of the Falkland Islands.
With a dispute over sovereignty, the Prime Minister of the day, Margaret Thatcher, sent a task force of warships to the Falklands in response.
But what was it like for those that were part of the task force sent to retake the British territory from the Argentinians? I'm pleased to say we're joined by Lord West, former Chief of Defence Intelligence and Security Minister under Gordon Brown, but most importantly, Lord West, a Falklands veteran. We've seen that you wrote an article in the Daily Express today about it. What was your role at the time of the Falklands?
I'm afraid I'm finding it very difficult to hear you. But can you hear me all right?
We can hear you loud and clear, Lord West. We were just wanting to know what it was like for you.
You sound as though you're underwater, but I can tell you what my sort of views of the Falklands were without being able to hear you that well. I mean, I think my perspective of it, is that it was a huge achievement for our nation to send a task force 8,000 miles, that immense distance, and to be able to actually recover the Falklands. And it was done so quickly. The Argentinians invaded on the 2nd of April, and we had won and thrown them out by the 14th of June, which is quite remarkable, really. But of course, as is always the case, I'm afraid any wars are horrible things. And you only have to have fought in one or two of them, as I have, to realise how horrible they are. And it means you lose people. And we lost, I think it was some 265 men in the Falklands, and many were injured, some physically and some mentally. And of course, that is always a very hard thing, because you're dealing with people who are loved by their children, their parents, their partners. I noticed it particularly. I lost 22 of my boys after my ship was abandoned and blew up. And I wrote letters, for example, to each of the next of kin. I also wrote a letter when I knew that these people had a child who was very young, a few months old or a couple of years old, for it to be opened when they were 18. And recently, one of these children said he would like to come and talk to me because it meant so much to him, seeing that letter about his father, who he'd never known, really. And so wars always result in loss, and that is the sad thing. But I think sometimes they have to be done. And as Plato said, only the dead have seen the last of war. We know this from the Ukraine. And I think in the case of the Falklands, rather like Ukraine, there was this attack by a very, very unpleasant group of people, the junta in the Argentine and it's Putin in Russia, and attacked a country that was full of people who wanted self-determination, were happy as they were, didn't want to change their status, and the junta in the Argentine decided otherwise and invaded them with no reason whatsoever to do it. And it was quite right and proper, and it was good that we were able to actually go down and eject them. And the results of that war were good, because in the Argentine they changed their junta, which had killed thousands of Argentinians. They got rid of the junta because they fell apart after that war. I think our status as a nation grew because in the 70s we'd been the sort of sick man of Europe. And I think there was a pulling together of people, and they felt we could achieve things. It was very interesting thereafter. Britain was on a bit of a roll. And the Falkland Islanders themselves, I've been there a number of times since, they're wealthier, more established. They still wish to remain British. They exercise their self-determination. And so the outcome was good. And because the Falklands weren't full of civilians, sadly, it's still sad, only 3 civilians were killed. This makes it, of course, very different from the Ukraine, where it's taking place in built-up areas and things like that. But this war was able to be taken place between basically 2 militaries, and although it's still horrible, that makes it better than one where there are a lot of civilians involved.
All right, I hope you can hear me now, and it doesn't sound as if I'm still on the Falkland Islands, but I just wondered, how big a risk was it for Mrs Thatcher to send a task force to the Falklands at the time? It seems now that it was inevitable that we would reclaim the Falklands, but how inevitable was it at the time when she actually made that decision?
It was. There's no doubt that it was a bit nip and tuck. As I said, it was 8,000 miles. The reality is, actually, there are only 2 nations in the world that could have done it. One is the Americans and ourselves. The Russians didn't have sufficient aircraft on aircraft carriers to do it. The French didn't have sufficient amphibious ships to do it. So there are only 2 countries who could do it. The Americans, of course, had huge power and could have done it. Although I have to say, probably they'd have ended up killing nearly everyone in the Falklands. That's the way they go about things. It was initially felt in the UK when the invasion took place, the advice from the Ministry of Defence, because the Chief of Defence Staff was in New Zealand, but from the Ministry of Defence was, we can't do this, it can't be done, we can't do anything militarily, we'll have to try and negotiate. Well, Henry Leach, who was the first Sea Lord, he heard that Margaret Thatcher was meeting with the Foreign Secretary and the Defence Secretary in Parliament. He rushed there in uniform and burst in on the meeting, and the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I've come to say, Prime Minister, that I can pull a task force together and we can recover these islands." And then he said something he felt he shouldn't as First Lord. He said, "And I think we should do that, Prime Minister, because otherwise tomorrow we'll be a very different nation." And Margaret Thatcher, of course, absolutely jumped at this opportunity, having been told nothing militarily could be done, to be told it could, she seized the opportunity and she released in the next couple of days £2.5 billion from the reserve. Remember, this was in 1982. And that money was, of course, used doing things to ships and the like, and the task group to be able to go down there. And the task force sailed very quickly indeed. It's interesting looking today, isn't it, that we have a war going on in Europe, in the Ukraine, and the possibility of a world war. God forfend that happens. And yet, actually, the government haven't increased any or put any extra money into the armed forces. But that's an aside, but I am amazed by that. And so the force sailed for the south, and of course the winter was about to approach in the South Atlantic. You know, terrible sea states down there, horrible weather. But our Navy had been used to operating right up in the North Atlantic, right up in the Arctic, countering the Russians in the Cold War. And so we were used to doing that. And we were able to get down there. We lost a number of ships getting our forces ashore, but we landed 5,000 troops, 5,000 tons of equipment without any of that being lost at all. We lost ships protecting it, but that landed. And once it was ashore, although there was some stiff fighting at times, it was a foregone conclusion. We were going to win. And that's why it all happened so quickly.
And just in a short sentence, if you could, I guess the key question is, do we have the defence capability to do the same thing today, should we be in the same situation?
If you'd asked me that 4 years ago, I'd have said absolutely not, because you can only do this sort of operation this far from your country if you have aircraft carriers. And now, thank goodness, we have got aircraft carriers again. But as regards the supporting ships, I think at the time of the Falklands, we had something like 70 or so, 75 escorts, frigates and destroyers. Our nation now has 18, which is a national disgrace. And so I think in those terms, it would be difficult. Another thing is we use 76 merchant ships in retaking the Falklands. And of course, they were manned by British merchant sailors. And we can see from this P&O thing going on at the moment, we're getting less and less British merchant sailors because the firms rather like employing cheap foreign sailors. But when you're in a war, you can't rely on them to fight for you. So there are a number of things like that that would make it much more difficult.
Lord West, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your service.
Absolutely. Now, imagine if we could grant you the power to rule the world. What would you do with it?
Would you be a force for good, or would you want to cause a stir? And what would be the very first thing you would change?
Well, this week's guest is the actor Adam Rickett, most famous for playing Nick Tilsley in Coronation Street and Kyle Kelly in Hollyoaks. He's also an entrepreneur. He's got his own bar in Knutsford there. So tell us, Adam, if you could rule the world, what would you do? What is the first law that you would pass?
I know there's many things I would like to do. I kind of think, though, as a species, the first thing we need to do is show responsibility. And I think where we are still to this day criminally poor in that is in our animal welfare. I've been a long-term advocate for animal welfare, both domestic and, for farming. And I think still to this day, unfortunately, it's terrible. I mean, last year we did have Finn's Law passed, which allowed maximum prison sentences of 5 years rather than 6 months. But you've got to remember that 5 years is for somebody, if you think about Harold Shipman or Ted Bundy or Jack the Ripper, they're the people who would get 5 years. You can take your dog outside, set it on fire, and you'll get a 6 months suspended prison sentence and £1,000 fine. And I think that's just still to this day absolute disgrace. So not only would I like to see the sentencing increased for people who abuse animals, I'd actually like to see the guidelines increased as well. Our judiciary system has to operate within very well-defined parameters of if you could do this thing, you get that punishment. And unfortunately, still to this day, animal welfare, it's too lenient. We've seen it especially during lockdown. People have rushed out and bought pets because they had nothing else to do. And we're now seeing those dogs dumped in massive droves at animal shelters or, unfortunately, abused really badly. And I think, as I said, as a species, we are the alpha on this planet. And I think showing more responsibility in that respect should be done by better treatment of our pets.
Adam, I think that's wonderful there. We are a nation of animal lovers, but like you say, if you do something as heinous as that, we should absolutely pay the price and do the sentence for it. Now, when you look back on your acting career, what is your, I smile as I look where you are. You're in Dexter's there in Knutsford, and you haven't quite got the Rover's Return of Coronation Street, but you have got a lot of community spirit, and I know you're doing a lot locally on use it or lose it, come to the high street, support your local area.
Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in a small village in Cheshire, and I've always been a bit of a country bumpkin rather than an urbanite. And even in my lifetime, I've just seen the utter whitewash of our village and town communities, where the local pubs have shut, the local post offices have shut, the local banks have shut. And I think, the one good thing that did come out of COVID was the fact that it did inspire people to shop local. And it's all well and good in 5 years' time when our high streets and our town centres are, deserted, and all there is in there is chain restaurants like Starbucks and Costa's and things like that, and that's all there is. Everyone's going to be throwing their arms up in the air and lamenting it. But the power is with, you, the shopper, you, the local. I support my local butcher. I support my local greengrocer. Could I get it cheaper at Tesco's? Probably, but the produce itself would be far inferior. And I also think with petrol prices going up now as well, actually driving to one of the supermarket chains is probably going to cost you more than the difference in the food itself. So I do think, there is this amazing community ability to actually revive a town, and we've seen it in many places like Altrincham with its Altrincham market. Knutsford itself has been very resilient on the high street, and I think that kind of community support, it's not something which can be dictated from above from our government or from our MPs. Unfortunately, it's something we have to make as a conscious choice. And I think, although it is, slightly difficult at times, and it is, especially with what's coming this year, going to be more painful, meeting those increased costs, you've got to remember that, in 20 years' time, you'll probably still be living in that same town, in that same village. And if it is now a desert, where does that community go from there?
Yeah. And your acting days, what do you think, when you look back at Nick Tilsley, what do you think? Are they happy memories?
I think he had the most stupid haircut in the world I've ever seen in my life, quite frankly. No, I mean, I think like most industries, COVID, there he is, what a dork. COVID had a massive impact.
Don't knock it, Adam. You were a heartthrob. We loved you.
I was very lucky. I had my bar to fall back on. But as an industry, oh good lord,
we had to have an excuse to get your torso out, Adam.
Not anymore. No, I mean, it's I've always acted, and I've always loved it, and I always will do it. The industry, as I said, it's only just starting to come back to life now. It's because essentially we couldn't get insurance, and because everyone's self-employed, there was really no government support for the entertainment industry throughout lockdown, and it's only just now starting to kick back off, which is exciting. But yeah, I mean, it's. I've been very lucky, to be honest with you, in my career. I got into Coronation Street 2 weeks after leaving school, having never acted a day in my life, which you could tell. And I've just been very lucky to have worked consistently now for 24 years.
Adam, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we look forward to seeing you in Dexter and Jones in the near future.
Dexter and Jones musical, it's coming.
So, coming up in the next hour, we look at the worrying concerns from a human rights charity in Ukraine about the number of civilian abductions taking place by Russian forces.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Good morning, you're watching the Saturday Selection on GB News. Coming up in the next hour.
After that, Will Smith slapped last week in defence of his wife Jada's alopecia. Exactly what causes the condition? We speak to one leading expert who has treated a number of A-listers. We look at the worrying concerns from a human rights charity in Ukraine about the number of civilian abductions taking place by Russian forces.
And it's the Grand National next week, but have you heard about the virtual Grand National? We'll speak to the person who started it. But first, here's the news headlines.
Good morning. It's just coming up to 11:02. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian troops in the north of the country are noticeably withdrawing. Overnight, he says the situation in the east remains extremely difficult and they're preparing for further attacks from Moscow in the south. It comes as Russia agrees to allow 7 humanitarian corridors to open for evacuations today. The Red Cross is seeking to lead a rescue convoy from the besieged city of Mariupol. President Zelensky is calling on the West to continue to impose sanctions on the Kremlin.
In the north of the country, the occupiers continued to retreat, slowly but noticeably. In the east, the situation remains extremely difficult. Russian troops are moving to Donbass and towards Kharkiv. They're preparing new strikes. We're preparing an ever more active defence.
Meanwhile, Russia's space director says his country will no longer cooperate on the International Space Station. Dmitry Rogozin says normal ties with NASA and other agencies will only be possible once what he is calling illegal sanctions against Moscow are lifted. It's after an American astronaut and 2 Russian cosmonauts landed safely in Kazakhstan on Wednesday, having left the ISS on board the same capsule. Thousands of people are expected to protest across Britain today over the cost of living crisis and the rising price of energy bills. Yesterday, millions around the UK saw their energy bill increase by an average of £700 a year as the price cap rose. An austerity campaign group says the demonstrations will highlight the real hardships people are facing, with many having to choose whether to eat or heat. Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Brandon Lewis, has told GB News the government can't completely nullify the impacts of global pressure on energy prices.
This is why the Chancellor put in place such a big package. It's now about £22 billion worth of support, with the biggest tax reduction overall in about 25 years, to put more money in people's pockets to deal with some of these challenges. But it is a global challenge that was building before the Ukraine invasion by Putin, and it's something that invasion is putting further pressure on, obviously.
Parents and carers can now book COVID jabs for children aged between 5 to 11 years old in England. They'll be able to make an appointment for a vaccine or go to a walk-in clinic from Monday. Children will be offered 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech jab, at least 12 weeks apart. Boris Johnson has welcomed a 2-month truce agreed by the warring sides in Yemen, saying it could provide an end to the suffering. The deal, negotiated by the United Nations between the Saudi-led coalition and Iran-backed Houthi rebels, is due to come into effect later this afternoon. The organisation estimates nearly 400,000 people have been killed during the 7-year conflict and millions have been pushed into hunger. Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking conviction has been upheld by a US judge who also denied her request for a retrial. Her lawyers had appealed after it emerged one of the jurors had failed to disclose he was a victim of sexual abuse. The judge found the juror harboured no bias towards Maxwell and that he was fair and impartial. Maxwell was convicted in December of helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls. The Oscars Academy says it's accepted Will Smith's resignation from the organisation and will continue to move forward with disciplinary proceedings. The 53-year-old actor has stepped down after slapping comedian Chris Rock on stage during last Sunday's ceremony. He says his actions were shocking, painful and inexcusable, and he'll accept any consequences that emerge. And today marks 40 years since Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands. 255 British soldiers died, along with 650 Argentinians in the conflict, after Margaret Thatcher ordered the territory to be recaptured. Pipers are being asked to play in a national commemoration on June the 18th to remember those who were killed and wounded in the 74-day conflict. Former head of the British Army, General Lord Dannatt, has told GBNews he remembers where he was when he heard about the invasion.
In 1982, I was a student at the Army Staff College at Camberley, and someone came into our syndicate discussion room and said the Argentinians have invaded the Falklands. And we all said to each other, where are the Falklands? So we sent someone off to the library to get an atlas, because I'm afraid there was a view. They were off Scotland. But of course, as we all realised, it was 8,000 miles down there in the South Atlantic. And that kicked off that day, that extraordinary adventure, which sadly led to the loss of 255 British servicemen.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Esther and Philip.
Good morning. Welcome to the Saturday Selection, coming up in the next hour.
After that slap brought alopecia to the forefront of our minds, we speak to the UK's leading expert in hair loss about alopecia and the emotions attached to losing your hair.
We bring you the latest showbiz and sports news. But first, let's return to the Saturday papers, and joining us for his selection of stories is the futurist and broadcaster Andrew Eborn. So, what caught your attention?
Well, it's a joy to see you, as always, as I say. And yesterday was April Fool's Day, but there's also, you're mixing the tragedy with the comedy, because people are saying it was April Fuel Day, because people were plunged into the choice between whether you eat or heat. And you either laugh or you cry. I prefer the laughter sort of side, but you need to look at the clear issues. The person who's brilliant at encapsulating the moment is the cartoonist Matt, who in the Telegraph, he's got this wonderful thing here, I don't know if we can pull that up, but in the Telegraph he says, the British seized my super yacht and froze my bank account, but it was my latest energy bill that forced me to leave the UK. And he's brilliant. I absolutely love that. And every time, her finger on it. But people plunged into that decision is really, really tough. The other good thing, and what I love about coming in on April the 2nd, is that we can review some of the best April Fool's gags out there. And the newspapers did themselves proud yesterday. And here's a little selection you might like. Thorpe Park, for example. They said it drained the water from its water ride because 80% of its guests get stressed after ruining their hair. And so you might get a clue here.
Well, I can sympathise with that one.
Ian Instagram, see what he did there? Operations manager at Thorpe Park said, it is important we react and adapt following feedback from our guests, so our decision to replace the tidal wave with AR water was an easy one. There you go, I love that one. The other one I love was in the Mirror, they claimed that the mud from Marble Arch Mound was used to rebuild Hadrian's Wall. It said the move was all part of the government's levelling up. Isn't that glorious? It's got to go. So lots of, but if you look over history, there's been some fantastic April Fools. I mean, they've removed the word gullible from the dictionary now.
Oh.
No, yeah, quite. Thank you. But in addition to that, you remember the BBC with the spaghetti trees? You remember when they talked about Big Ben was going to be replaced with Digital Dave?
Yeah.
I quite like Piers Morgan going on a plinth in Trafalgar Square to wake up the woke brigade.
Oh, I love
really
that. I'd sponsor him to do that.
Well, I saw an article in the Times, page 15, happiness machines push buttons of number 10 staff. Apparently, staff in 10 Downing Street have been going crackers because they've said that they're being patronised by the installation of some so-called happy or not machines around number 10. I'm glad this is April the 2nd because I thought it might have been an April Fool's Day joke, but maybe it's a day late, this one. And it's these things that you see in airports, you know, where you say...
I've seen it.
I think British Airways have taken theirs away at the moment. And Heathrow.
But if they're clever about that, though, Phil, what they should do, it's like most research things. So rather you can have happy, very happy, deliriously happy, or ecstatic.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have a choice which button you press. It should be good.
I quite like this story because when I worked for Asda, I actually introduced these machines on the checkout.
Oh, did you?
I did.
He's the man
I did.
Oh,
many moons ago, I introduced them onto the checkouts at Asda. When the customer went through the checkout, there was a machine at the end, and they had to press a button whether they were happy with the service.
Oh, very good.
Or well, you say very good. I thought it was very good, and I spent Asda's hard-earned money on these machines, but I don't think they lasted long.
So
I think
they're going to last as long as I think number 10.
I think
they'll be removed.
Perhaps if number 10 had spoken to me beforehand, I could have said it sounds like a good idea, but it doesn't necessarily work.
But there's a clever way of manipulating those sort of things, because as long as the button's close to you, you're more likely to press it. If you have one really far away, or make it stop so that one doesn't go down, then we could have helped you with that.
Well, I could have worn them.
Rigging the results.
Rigging the result. That never happens.
But then again, number 10 never listened to me about anything, to be honest. So there you go. Esther, what caught your eye?
Well, I was looking at the signs, the secret signs that betray your true class.
Oh, go on then.
A fantastic story in the Mail today, page 46 and 47. So I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
But I'll tell you some things first. So in a household, the upper class would have a simple doorbell. The lower class have a chiming doorbell. The upper class houses are shabby, frayed, unkempt, and there's no TV or a TV not visible. The lower classes have clean houses, pristine, effortless, or effortfully designed, I should say, and the focal point is the TV. Where's the TV in your house? I think this is a big one. I think the TV is a big one.
I don't think we have many TVs, but the butler normally points me in directions.
But is it a feature? Because I think this is a biggie. Is it a feature?
I think when people talk about televisions now, I mean, it is. Some of it's a feature, but you get your media and TV on different devices. So actually, like most households, you could probably have several different people watching on screen.
He's not giving the right. Philip, I'm going to ask you the question. We've fallen out over this, by the way.
Have you?
So, yes.
Is this a Jerry Springer moment? Oh, I love it. Is there going to be a...
It's a different thing each day, Andrew.
But this one's the TV moment. We have a big TV.
Yes.
So obviously we're lower class. We have a big TV. And it
not big enough.
My big TV. I thought it was missing.
Not big enough.
And I thought it was huge. I think it's about 54 inches. It's huge. Thank you. It's like a mini cinema, but not big enough for Philip.
No.
He wants a bigger one, as does my dad.
Yeah, although I do say size isn't everything.
I thank you.
But the thing is, Esther's got this down here. She's mentioning this, and the Mail are saying that this is an upper class versus lower class. I thought this was a male versus female thing, that men wanted a big TV in the centre of the room and women didn't. I didn't realise it was a class thing.
This is now
I thought it was more of a gender thing.
So there you go. Who'd have known it? I'm upper class on this one. You're lower class.
I'm lower class on
How
most
about
things.
this one? Knife. So when you're eating your peas.
Yes.
John Major.
No, not mushy. Don't pretend to be a lower class. Not guacamole.
I like mushy peas.
Right,
Me
so
too.
what is it? Peas on the back of the fork or peas on the concave side of the fork?
Oh, look at the word concave.
Look, you're perspiring. You're getting all hot and flustered.
I tell you, it's a bit worrying.
What are you doing? Which one do you do?
I'm trying to think. No, I do love mushy peas, I have to say. I would probably, because you can't get them, you can't piece them. I would probably do it on the concave side.
What would you do, Phil?
Yeah, but that's probably... I'm with Andrew, but I think that's probably because I'm just not very competent.
But the upper classes do it at the top there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas we would shovel them in.
Yeah.
They're delicately taking.
Well, they're turning them into mushy peas by getting into the
mushy peas.
Yeah.
See, these are all important things. I think the other one as well is what colour are your cars? This is a bit of a giveaway. Cars. The upper class colours are black, navy, dark, grey, or green. We're doing well on that one.
Yours black and mine's grey. So.
Lower class, white, red, two-tone. But the other thing which I've noticed here creeping in, the lower classes will be spotless, shiny, washed at the weekend. The upper classes are dirty, neglected and battered. We've got a bit of a problem with this hygiene, haven't we? In the household, it's shabby, unkempt. Lower classes, sparkling and clean.
Oh, there you go.
Well, what did my grandma always say to me? Cleanliness is next to godliness. And always cleaning, always cleaning.
Well, I think you're probably right. And I would love a red car, but actually mine is black and it's covered in mushy peas, obviously.
Maybe it started red and it's so dirty, it's now black.
You're right, filthy.
Now, I wanted your opinion on this one, Andrew, because this is the thing that gets my blood boiling and other people's blood boiling. I think Telegraph, page 16, terms such as person prioritise men over women. So person is not a gender-neutral term, as it prioritises men, as studies found. So all those years when we were all told you had to call somebody a chairperson or all that kind of stuff.
Or a post person. You can no longer have a postman. You have a post person.
Exactly.
It's just called postie.
Post is good. Post is
all those years when you thought you were being politically correct by saying chairperson, now apparently some lunatics, linguistic, I said lunatic, that was my interpretation. Linguistic and psychology experts at New York University have taken political correctness a step further and now said that person is now not a gender-neutral term. It prioritises men over women and is a fundamental bias. I was thinking about this. How on earth can this be not gender neutral? But then I thought it's person. Son. Maybe it should be per daughter.
Per daughter.
I see. You see it within the word. I don't know. You might have changed the word when we were talking about a chairman to a chairperson, but if every chairman was still a man, all of a sudden that reflects as a chairperson. You think of a man as a person, because the role, you were renaming the role, but the role was still occupied predominantly by...
You're not supporting these idiots, are you?
I'm not.
New York University.
I'm just saying, why would a word change its meaning? And the only way it can change its meaning is by association with.
And people are looking for effects. And I'll tell you what I object to most about this. It devalues what are legitimate claims. I believe in a world where we're blind to race, sex, colour, creed, all that sort of thing. And what happens is by focusing on these trivial things, and they are trivial, this isn't an offence. It wasn't meant as an offence. It wasn't meant to be sexist or whatever. We need to shine a spotlight on the real issues. And by having the trivial stuff, it devalues the real points.
You've got to think, how do you stop the division, not create more divisions? And I think this looking, as it were, for divisions is worse. We've got to think, how do we just, as you say, just be able to judge each on them?
It's the point I was making with you earlier, is we look at these sort of things. If you want to find offence, it's easy. You want to find... Now we're drowning in a sea of information, most of which is false. 99.9% of the information we get is false.
Except on this show.
Only on this show. It's the only place you can get the truth. I love that sort of stuff. Well, you're right. So we need to question everything, but also focus on the real issues, because there are some really important... Equality is so important. Making sure there isn't genuine discrimination is so important. These things devalue that.
Now, I think there was a story on the front page of the Financial Times that you were were keen on.
Well, there's a number of these sort of things. There's also offices emptying fast as COVID infection reaches record high. And this is the time when they're getting rid of the free testing. And I'm with Trump, and not a sentence you necessarily always hear me say, but I'm with Trump when he sort of said, if you remember a number of months ago, he said the way to cut down the numbers is to stop testing, because then you won't have lots of numbers. And I think by testing people all the time, you're effectively creating a culture of fear. And it was basically the sort of situation where the best way of selling anything is through fear. The father of PR, Edward Bernays was his name, he always used to say that if you want to sell anything, from Dixie cups to medicine to your latest product, make people scared. By testing people all the time and saying that you're going to be contracting this terrible thing, it made people scared. Now, the scientists seem to agree that it's not as bad as normal things happen with the virus as it evolves. It's not as bad as it would normally be. be. But speaking of bad things as well, the interesting thing also, I just wanted to mention very briefly, Putin, the cancer doctor, and the baths of antler blood. So it's been reported, and this is on the front page of the Telegraph also with the Matt cartoon. What they're saying is that they suspect that Putin may have a thyroid issue, and that would account for his puffiness. It may account for his behaviour. It may also account for why he's very worried about these enormous tables where you're sat 40 miles down in Brighton and we're up in Glasgow, love Glasgow, and that might explain it.
I just thought that was to prevent assassination attempts, but
it could be, but that's what they're saying here. But what I also love, and they go into all sorts of things about the theories about why he might be puffy because he's taking these steroids and so on and so forth. But they're also saying that he's been bathing in blood extracted from severed deer's antlers. Which sounds extraordinary, and drinking unicorn blood just to make sure you're protected. But it might give a measure of the person. What I would also say, however, is that in any war, the first victim, the first casualty is the truth. And if you look back at history, all the time, this is what you do. You minimise or diminish people's standing in the world by spreading all sorts of misinformation. And that works on every possible level.
Andrew Eborn, thank you so much for joining us again.
It's a joy.
Coming up after the break, with the Grand National coming up in a week's time, we speak to the founder of the virtual Grand National. What is it, and what can we expect?
In the wake of the Will Smith Oscar scandal, we'll speak to the UK's leading expert on hair loss.
And we'll bring you all the shorts. Not shorts, that was showbiz and sport, now known as shorts, updates, so don't go anywhere.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Remember, last Saturday it was all about the sunshine and high temperatures. Today, well, a very different feel, a much colder feel, but still, most places will be dry and bright with some sunshine, thanks to high pressure. It's not a big high pressure, though, sitting right across us. We do have this weather front that's been bringing some wet weather overnight across Wales and southwest England, still providing some showers here and some sleet and snow falling through the morning. These showers over eastern England are also a mixture of rain, sleet and snow, and it could be icy here through the morning as well. Generally elsewhere, a lot of fine, dry weather, and although we'll see one or two more showers developing, South Wales, southwest England, overall turning a little drier by the afternoon. Fine day for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it is chilly. Temperatures still for most single figures. However, that bitter wind that's been blowing for the past couple of days is an awful lot lighter today. Through the evening and overnight, well, still a few showers around across northern and eastern parts of England during the evening, but they do tend to fade away. Temperatures will drop away sharply. If you're heading out tonight, just be prepared for that. It's going to turn frosty pretty quickly, and a fairly hard frost by Sunday morning. Towns and cities down to freezing or a touch below, certainly rural areas well below on Sunday morning. So a cold, frosty start again on Sunday. Plenty of sunshine though, and once the sun gets up, that frost will melt away fairly sharply. Maybe one or two isolated showers. Certainly later in the day, tomorrow we're going to see cloud increasing for Northern Ireland, some rain pushing in here in the afternoon and into northwest Scotland. But for the vast majority, tomorrow's a dry and a bright day. Still on the cold sides, eventually just about creeping up to double figures in a few places. But we are going to see things turning milder. The cold air in place this weekend, but a weather front pushing into the northwest will bring some rain, but also milder conditions by the time we get to Monday. Enjoy your weekend.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London EC3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Welcome back. We've got some of your views here.
Yeah, Terry in Northumberland says, I agree with you, Esther.
Oh,
the Queen who has always put her country and people above all is, as you so eloquently stated, as always, a bit creepy here, Terry.
I like it.
She is a mother first and foremost, and I would think almost all mothers in the land would do exactly the same.
Well done, Terry. I've got Jennifer here. Jennifer says, of course he should have his Oscar removed. End of. Will has a habit of slapping those that upset him. It is about time that these people were punished as any other person would be. It was battery and foul language aired live in the public. It makes me really angry that people, some people should be able to ignore the rules. It's just trash tea. And the elite were there, and it was trash TV.
Mm. And Nigel Curlin says, once again, the nanny state has to help the public to work out what they eat in eating houses. Does no member of the public have any common sense?
And we've got Amber here says, we'll definitely ignore calorie labels. No one tells me what to do. What are we, children? I can choose for myself. Thank you very much indeed. So those were some of the views coming. Now, I just have to say for Jennifer, though, although the Oscar should be removed, absolutely. When she put there, it's a habit. Well, we don't know that it is a habit. So maybe she meant slapping down verbally rather than physically there. But, but absolutely, Oscar should be removed is what she was saying.
Fair enough. Now, it's that time of year when the Grand National returns to our screens next week. But before the real event takes place, racing fans have a chance to enjoy the virtual Grand National.
But what is it? And how does the virtual race actually work? Here to tell us more is the man behind the virtual Grand National, and that is Rob McLaughlin. Hello, Rob.
How are we?
Oh, we're very good indeed. So you've got us all wondering, what's the virtual Grand National? Obviously, from Liverpool, I'm at the Grand National annually. Bit of a pilgrimage, but virtually.
Well, absolutely. Well, we started this on television, on ITV, way back in 2017. And really what we wanted to do, we wanted to take the most popular race, arguably in the world, certainly in the United Kingdom. We wanted to take that race and we wanted to try and see whether we could tell the nation, or rather a computer could tell the nation, 24 hours before the real race, who might win it. And when we started this, Esther and Philip, on ITV in 2017, we kind of, took the mickey a little bit out of the computer. And in the first race in 2017, the winner of the virtual Grand National And the animations are done brilliantly by a team of animators in Manchester under the guise of Inspired Entertainment, who are one of the world's biggest virtual sports creators. The 2017 winner of the Virtual Grand National was a horse called Cause of Causes. And 22 hours later, Cause of Causes nearly won the real Grand National, and it missed out in a photo finish, which is very, very unusual in the Grand National. So we began to think, well, maybe there's more to this computer than we thought. And in 2018, lo and behold, it got Tiger Roll right on the nose and predicted and told the world, told the nation, 22 hours before the real race, that Tiger Roll would win, and almost how Tiger Roll would win.
Well, you need to start doing the virtual lottery number calls.
So how does this computer system...
I'm not allowed to take any bets on it, and there aren't any bets on the Virtual Grand National, though, of course, as you know, in 2020, because of the COVID crisis, the Virtual Grand National replaced the real race on ITV. And that was the only time that the bookmakers actually did take bets on it. And I think we raised something like over £3 million for NHS charities together, and a certain amount of money, I think it was about €300,000 for charities in Ireland. But the amazing thing about it is that NHS charities together say that within 6 weeks of the programme going out and putting into the public mind that you could give centrally to the NHS, their COVID fund actually reached £100 million within 6 weeks. That includes what Sir Captain Tom did, etc., etc. But nevertheless, they say it put the idea in the people's heads. And that's a great thing about it. And, you know, throughout this Virtual Grand National, we've discovered that the horses, where they land, whether they make it through, it's uncannily accurate to what happens in real life.
Can I just ask, Rob, how does this computer system work? Because if you're so good at predicting winners, you should be doing it on every race, not just the Grand National. I mean, who's operating this computer? Who's the star person you've got behind this computer system?
Well, of course, that's top secret, so I can't really tell you, Philip, is the short answer. No, I mean, it uses algorithms. The team at Inspired, who have been fantastic, effectively use algorithms. So you're dealing with the form that the horses have had previously. You're dealing with their ability to actually, you know, get around the course, because obviously it's a massive course and, you know, some serious jumps. So you're looking at their ability, what they've done previously, and then, of course, conditions, the weather, which can affect it. But the great thing about this as well is you can have a lot of fun with it. And that's one of the things we do. So, for example, this year, when the programme goes out on ITV4, first off next Friday at 9:15, then it's on ITV at 1 o'clock on the Saturday, and then across the ITV hub. What you'll also see is a Grand National Race of Champions. And people love this because it brings back to life great horses from the past, like Red Rum, like Crisp, etc., Aldeniti, and so on. And this year, we're doing something really, really unusual. We've asked Richard Pittman to pick the horses that he thinks should have run the Grand National, but never did. So for the first time ever, Arkle, one of the most famous horses, of course, ever, which won the Irish Grand National, it won at Cheltenham, of course, it is going to run the Grand National. And of course, what we use, Philip and Esther, is we use the real entry course. We filmed that with drones back in 2016, I think it was. So we filmed the course, we had cameras all over the place, and then, of course, we superimpose the CGI horses onto the real course. So it's fabulous. It's amazing.
Fantastic. Ron McLaughlin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And in the studio with us as well, we've got Aidan McGee there, our top sports reporter, analyst, person in the studio. So we've got the World Cup draw.
Yeah, I've got just the Grand National, though.
You've got the winner for next week, have you, Aidan? Are you going to tell us the winner?
30 years since I won the Grand National, £15 at a horse called Party Politics. April the 9th, I think it was, 1992. QPR lost away to Southampton 2-1 that day. And it was a few days.
Mind of useless information.
It was a few days before the general election of 1992.
Yeah, that's right.
John Major winning for the
So
Conservative
basically,
Party.
the long and short was you chose the horse on its name.
Yes, I did.
And that's how it,
Yes,
and it won.
I won 14
This is our sports expert. This is our sports expert.
He was trying to be technical of this happened, this happened, this happened. No, really, you just like the name.
Yeah, I did. They won with a majority of 21.
So we won't be asking for your tip next Saturday for the Grand National.
To be fair, for the Grand National, I think it is as much anybody's game. It's such a complicated
well, it's a bit of a lottery, isn't it?
But England's World Cup qualifying round shouldn't be a lottery.
No,
we've done well.
No, I think so. I mean, look, it's not as easy as it looks. USA have got 5 players who play in the Champions League here in Europe. Christian Pulisic at Chelsea as well. Iran have been very strong in qualifying, but they haven't played in a World Cup since 1998. And then you've got this situation with the 4th team. It could be Scotland, it could be Wales, it could be Ukraine. The situation is that Ukraine plays Scotland in June. There's still another 2 months to wait for that. Now, the question there is, will that game actually go ahead? 18 of the 24 players who play for Ukraine are based at home. They could be called up into combat. There's that issue as well. Are they going to get to play any games before that to prepare? You can't really expect them to go into a massive game like that and probably a subsequent game after that if they win against Wales, if they haven't prepared properly. So there's a possibility that they may play a couple of games at Wembley if they can get out of the country against English club sides like Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, give the money to war victims, and at least that allows Ukraine to prepare. So if they play against Scotland, then, OK, Scotland could win, and then you've got Scotland or Wales could go into that group as well, and that could pose a problem for England. So it's not as easy as it looks. I mean, there are other groups that you would have looked to avoid. Spain and Germany are paired together in one group as well. So and with a 32-team tournament as well, it does dilute the quality just ever so slightly. I mean, back in Italia 90, for example, it was 24 teams, and so you did get a concentration of quality. The big teams will still get through to the latter rounds, I think, but overall, I think that you would have probably chosen not far off that if you were going to choose a group, if you were Gareth Southgate, but he's taken nothing for granted.
Aidan McGee, thank you so much for joining us.
Guys.
And still to come on Saturday's selection, we speak to a leading expert on hair loss to discuss the emotional impact of this condition.
That and all your latest Showbiz update after the news.
It's 11:36. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian troops in the north of the country are noticeably withdrawing. Overnight, he says the situation in the east remains extremely difficult and they're preparing for further attacks from Moscow in the south. It comes as Russia agrees to allow 7 humanitarian corridors to open for evacuations today. Meanwhile, Russia's space director says his country will no longer cooperate on the International Space Station. Dmitry Rogozin says normal ties with NASA and other agencies will only be possible once what he is calling illegal sanctions against Moscow are lifted. It's been confirmed Metropolitan Police Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick will leave her post on the 10th of April. She's resigned in February after the Mayor of London said he'd lost confidence in her leadership. Protests are expected to take place across the UK today over the rising price of energy bills. Yesterday, millions saw their energy bill increase by an average of £700 a year as the price cap rose. An austerity campaign group says the demonstrations will highlight the real hardships people are facing, with many having to choose whether to eat or heat. And parents and carers can now book COVID jabs for children aged between 5 to 11 years old in England. They'll be able to make an appointment for a vaccine or go to a walk-in clinic from Monday. Children will be offered 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech jab, at least 12 weeks apart. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now, after this short break, it'll be back to Esther and Philip.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back. It's 11:40 and coming up at 12 is Alistair Stewart, who's with us now. So tell us, what have you got on your show?
Well, I've got an absolute fascination at the moment with the cost of living crisis, but at one slight remove. As you both know, I studied economics sort of loosely at university, but I genuinely have a fascination with it. And it's that old thing called aggregate demand. And if you ask people to start paying a lot more on their energy bills, on their broadband subscriptions, eating away at that domestic budget, then the amount of money that they've got left to spend on anything else declines. And that way lies stagflation and a possible real slowdown in the economy. So, lo and behold, we are honoured to be joined by Stuart Rose, Sir Stuart Rose, now Lord Stuart Rose, former chairman of Marks and Spencer, currently chair of Asda and Ocado in between. Because what I really want to say to him is, what's the impact going to be? Not on my wallet and yours, because we all know that, we can work it out ourselves, but on British business. And how worried is he about stagflation and the decline in aggregate demand? Literally, minutes before I came in to talk to you lovely people, I got a message from my producer that we've just got in touch with one of our journalist friends in Ukraine, who's going to give us an update on how she sees things, because there's the whole story about trying to get people out of Mariupol, and we're also going to be talking about the possibility of negotiations. There's an amazing story, I think it's in the Telegraph, saying that the Germans have now accused us of playing games with the politics of the negotiations, and we've got Dennis McShane, who you will both remember with great affection, I'm sure, from parliamentary days, and Dennis, former Labour MP, but more importantly in this context, former Europe Minister, who knows a little bit about negotiations as well, and a mate of mine, Rory McCallion, who you won't know, but Rory and I were at university together, brilliant commentator on industry, negotiation, invention, innovation. We're going to be talking a little bit about negotiations with those two, and about the state of the economy. And my final plug is for a friend of mine, Secret Squirrel Time, because of what his day job is. So we respect that. But he's recently been out in Ukraine trying to get this whole movement of refugees moving, because I think the government's heart is in the right place, but the administration of seeing that through seems to be slowed up a little bit. There's quite a good story in one of the papers this morning about Michael Gove and Lord Harrington working with one of the big charities called Reset to try and help it through. But, you know, there are so many people here who've given so much money to help Ukrainian refugees and who genuinely want to say, yeah, you can come and stay in my spare room or what have you. But it's just getting A to B that doesn't seem to be working. So we'll get the latest from the ground from him.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Hope everyone will stay tuned at 12 o'clock for Alistair and his friends.
Now, a Ukrainian human rights organisation, Human Rights Centre Zamina, has published a list of civilians that have been abducted by the Russian government and is demanding their immediate release.
I'm pleased to say that we're joined by Titania Pechonchik, who is a spokesperson with Zamina, a human rights organisation in Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us. Who are the people that have been abducted by Russian forces?
There are a number of enforced disappearances on the territories newly occupied by Russia in different regions of Ukraine. This is Kherson, Zaporizhia region, Donetsk region also. There were cases in Kiev region, but now Russian troops are withdrawing from these territories. And usually these are different categories of people, like Ukrainian military veterans who participated in the war in Donbass, but not only. One of the groups that we are working with and focusing our attention are active members of local communities, like local city mayors, deputies of local city and village councils, journalists, human rights defenders, volunteers, religious leaders of local communities, and we fixed over 70 cases of abductions, enforced disappearances of such people.
Do we know what the fate of these people is? Do we know that they're still alive? Have you heard from these people at all to know what's happening to them?
Well, some of them were already released. About the majority from this list, we do not have information where they are taken. From those who were released, we know that they are taken in captivity, and there is a big risk of applying torture and ill treatment to them. And the main reason why these people are being captured is to terrify the local communities, as there is a big resistance to the Russian invaders on these newly occupied territories, and the nation is very united. People arrange a protest, peaceful demonstration with Ukrainian flags under the gun of Russian troops. And in order to break this resistance, the invaders want to send a signal by abducting these active members of the local communities for others not to protest. And unfortunately, there are sad news, because just today, a few hours ago, we received the news that the photojournalist Maxim Levin from Levy Bereg Left Bank online newspaper was found killed in the territories near Kiev, where they were shelling. And he was in that territory, and he was missing for a while. While also President Zelensky told that some of the city mayors who were kidnapped are also not alive anymore, but we do not have the names who these people are, and we hope that majority of these people will be released, and that's why we think it's very important to talk about them, to tell their stories, and to send Kremlin the clear signal that international community is watching and following the destinies of these people. And I believe it would help, if not to release them immediately, but at least to decrease the risk of applying torture to them.
And do you think the West is doing enough to put pressure on Putin to behave properly?
We do not think that enough is being done. For example, my NGO have been working on the documentation of human rights abuses in the occupied Crimea. And during the last 8 years, we've been telling the international organizations and foreign governments that the sanctions that were imposed on Putin and on Putinist Russia and against Russian businesses were not enough. And we were watching that throughout these years, Putin's regime was only growing. And we also, by the way, 8 years ago, when Russia occupied Crimea, we also fixed a number of enforced disappearances of journalists, activists, and many of them from the Crimean Tatar background. And some of these people are still missing. We think they are not alive anymore. And we see this is like a repeating practice. Later it was done in Donbass, and now it is done by Russians in many other regions of Ukraine. Therefore, we call the foreign nations to stop buying Russian oil and gas. I know that there are increasing prices because of this war on the markets, on the world markets, but we pay with our blood. for that. And we defend the democracy.
But Tatiana, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning and filling us in on that news that's happening in Ukraine. Thank you very much. Now, you must have been living under a rock if you didn't see the exchange between Will Smith and Chris Rock at last Sunday's Oscars. The one good thing to come out of it is the awareness of alopecia, better known as hair loss. Well, someone who knows all about this condition is a lady called Lucinda Ellery, who joins us now in the studio. So, Lucinda Ellery, we saw the fracas, the upset at the Oscars, and now we've learnt a little bit more, maybe, about alopecia. But what I want to understand from you as a leading specialist in this area is probably the emotion attached to hair loss and alopecia.
Well, that was very clearly demonstrated, I think, on the Oscar night, to say the very least. And I obviously think that possibly Jada's reaction was one of raised out, like, oh, God, here we go again, sort of thing. And I think Will, who might have been listening to her for years with the emotional stress of a woman losing her hair, I'm not saying it doesn't stress men too, but it does distress men without a shadow of a doubt. But for a woman, it has a big, big meaning. And clearly, he reacted really, really badly to it. But I think there's also a misunderstanding what alopecia means in many ways. It does just mean literally hair loss. And a lot of people do believe that if you've got alopecia, you've got big chunks of hair missing, the lot even, if that's, you know, you can lose the lot, and it's all true, but that's alopecia areata. And I think there's a confusion because I've been having a lot of calls on this, as you can imagine. My phone's been hot, like, do you really think Jade has got no hair? And I'm like, no, I don't. And people are saying that they didn't see much evidence of that, in a sense that she looks like she could have a whole head of hair, that she could grow and disguise any kind of hair loss. I don't know what it is. I haven't examined her. I did see a very small picture of a slight, sort of like Alice band in the front of her hair. And I think she rocked that shaved look like fantastically well. What comfort. I think that takes confidence myself, but that's just my own reaction, because I did lose chunks of my hair.
Because I was going to talk about, I was going to talk about this because you went on this journey, so you have this understanding.
I do.
Because you lost your hair and you recreated as it is.
Hair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And how good it looks, and how good it looks, Lucinda.
I have to say,
but what was your journey? Because in losing your hair, you learnt about how to recreate her, and you do that now for other people, and you have centres in Los Angeles, New York, and in Great Britain. But what was your journey to understand really what Will Smith's wife's going through?
Well, to be honest, I look at her with awe, because I myself look back on my constant thinking about it, first thing when I wake up, last thing when I go to sleep. When I was very young, it really affected my confidence very, very deeply. It certainly wouldn't have allowed me to stand up for myself in many ways. I found the whole thing, big words would be humiliating, embarrassing, devastating, and I can't even begin to tell you the stories. In fact, Abdul and I came from Reading, from Richmond, all the way to the studio. We talked about nothing else but hair loss, his daughters. He's got daughters, and how, you know, and what he thought about the Will Smith thing. It's really highlighted the word alopecia because it has a devastating effect, particularly in the female of our species. You know, we grow up with granddads who haven't got hair, or an uncle or a dad, and we can't, and you know, Jason Statham, I mean, stand alone, gorgeous, doesn't need a single hair on his head. But for a woman, it's a very, very different thing.
And we've got, you know, some of the work that you have done, because people will come to you, women, fundamentally it's women who come to you, whether they've got alopecia, whether they've lost their hair through burns or scars, through cancer, and how you transform them from no hair to having hair. And I think we've got some of those sort of transformations that you've done. So how do you go about that? You developed the scheme?
Yes, we pioneered the whole system, and we have it patented in America as well, where we fill in gaps using meshes and hair and hairlines and so forth. We basically took Hollywood technology, and because we've been doing it for over 40 years, you know, we've built and grown and refined to flawless hair, you know.
Well, I'm going to tell this story if you don't. I know you watched the film Splash.
I did.
With
Thank you,
Daryl Hannah.
Daryl.
Yeah, with Daryl Hannah, and you thought, my goodness, that hair is amazing. Surely it can't be real. You called up the producers of the Hollywood studio, asked what it was, and then you took that technique, changed it, and have used it for people with, as I said, alopecia or cancer or hair loss.
Absolutely. I myself had always dreamed of being a mermaid. I wanted to die a mermaid, literally, and I'd always wanted this lovely long hair. So seeing that film with it underwater, this mermaid, I was just completely transfixed. And I spent a lot of money 40 years ago, like 300 quid, which was a fortune, phoning America without realising the time differences in the studios. And you'd hear, oh, we've got that woman on from London, England again. And I'd be like, oh. And eventually I found out it was all done in this country by pure sets of chance, which I don't necessarily believe in.
But you took that Hollywood technique and
just
you've used it now for people who have lost their hair in this country. But talking of Hollywood techniques...
Well, yeah, I mean, I just should say, Alopecia UK, the charity, is based in my constituency in Shipley, so I know how important this issue is. And page 20 of the Daily Star today talks about Ranveer Singh, who's also talked about hair loss, which started when her dad had a heart attack and died when she was 8 or 9, and her hair's never come back. So,
and that was
you know, it goes to show how important this is. We're also joined by Hayley Palmer, our showbiz expert. Hayley, you were absolutely right about Will Smith winning an Oscar last week. You predicted.
I made good predictions.
Well, you say that.
But I didn't.
You didn't predict you didn't predict the slap.
I didn't. I wish I had, but what can I say? It shocked me, Philip. I mean, like you say, we were talking about it last Saturday, and what a lot of drama has gone on. I mean, I've just read today in the papers that Will Smith has resigned from the Academy. He released a statement yesterday. So obviously it's still very upsetting news, isn't it?
It is. No, it's shocking news, isn't it? To be perfectly honest, we were shocked by that. And just very, very quickly, Bruce Willis has had to give up acting.
Oh, it's so sad to read. I've been reading about that in the paper today. It was days after his 67th birthday that he found out, and I know that he had a lot of films in production this year.
Hayley, thank you very much indeed. Lucinda Ellery, thank you very much indeed. We'll be back at 10 o'clock next week. Don't forget, Alistair Stewart next. But now it's time for the weather.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Remember, last Saturday it was all about the sunshine and high temperatures. Today, well, a very different feel, a much colder feel, but still, most places will be dry and bright with some sunshine, thanks to high pressure. It's not a big high pressure, though, sitting right across us. We do have this weather front that's been bringing some wet weather overnight across Wales and southwest England, still providing some showers here and some sleet and snow falling through the morning. The showers over eastern England are also a mixture of rain, sleet and snow, and it could be icy here through the morning as well. Generally elsewhere, a lot of fine, dry weather, and although we'll see 1 or 2 more showers developing, South Wales, southwest England, overall turning a little drier by the afternoon. Fine day for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it is chilly. Temperatures still for most single figures. However, that bitter wind that's been blowing for the past couple of days is an awful lot lighter today. Through the evening and overnight, well, still a few showers around across northern and eastern parts of